This week, I came across an article about the psychological causes of racism. And that led me down a lot of rabbit trails as I tried to avoid writing this sermon. I found a lot of studies on the relationship between human psychology and the effort to determine how our anthropology and our psychology and our choices intermix to make racist and discriminatory decisions that sometimes separate us from each other. Now, I'm no expert, and there were many expert opinions in these articles, and they were very difficult to sort out, but one article in particular caught my eye. Psychologist Steve Taylor suggested that there is a sort of psychological descent into racism that has 5 steps. The first condition he outlines that sends us into the spiral towards racism is what he calls the psychological theory of terror management. When confronted with our mortality, or with scarcity, or with any other perceived threat to our well-being, we can become anxious and insecure. One defensive response to that can be to cling to group identities, national or ethnic ones, or others, as a way to strengthen our sense of belonging, to relieve us from that threat. Taylor suggested that by itself, this is not a bad thing, and in many ways we come to church to achieve that sense of belonging, to claim a group identity and to relieve existential anxiety, for example. Or some may belong to a tribe of Chargers fans or anti-Chargers fans. Finding a sense of group identity is not bad. But he says that the second level in this spiral towards racism can occur when that group identity takes a turn placing anger or aggression against other groups. When the group identity finds its cohesion by defining itself against the other, they've plunged into the second level of this spiral. The third and fourth levels of this process are related. The next stage is to lose empathy for those in the outside group while retaining empathy with those in the group. And he points out that Hitler, for example, was known for his ability to be kind to the people around him. And so the fourth level then is to take that lack of empathy for outsiders even further and categorize all outsiders in one standard way, to dehumanize them or de-individualize them. And the outsiders are then seen only through the lens of the stereotype and the prejudice. And so finally, at the lowest level of this spiral, these people might project their own flaws and challenges onto the outside group, their own flaws and challenges. So outsiders then become scapegoats for any problem, often resulting in violence. And Taylor notes that those with narcissistic and paranoid personality traits are especially prone to this behavior because they're unable to reflect on their own faults and more likely to push them outwards onto others. I really appreciated Taylor's model, while at the same time wondered about how it might help us reflect on systemic and institutional racism. Individual racism is an oversimplification of racism that somehow reinforces the idea that racism is just an individual behavior. It's not. Racism is embedded into the very fabric of the culture we live in, and it requires an active resistance from all of us if we want to change it. American culture values European Anglo habits and practices, not just skin color, in explicit and subtle ways. From our emphasis on individualism to our assumption that someone must be blamed if there's something going wrong, to our belief that more is better. We have a culture that's distinctively white, and it's hard to evaluate it while we're living in the middle of it. Jen Zhao and I just spent a few months trained to be trainers in a new diocesan anti-racism training called Visions. And at least for me, it was challenging to be asked to look at our culture in a way that's honest, that doesn't diminish what I value, but also acknowledges that our U.S. culture doesn't make room for other ways and values and belief systems, and that can filter down to all of our institutions, including our churches too. It's hard work. I learned from that training that it won't do simply to speak up when a wall is being built if we really want to tackle racism at its core. Although certainly a wall built on the argument that brown people are criminal is racist and must be resisted. That seems especially poignant after yesterday's incident with pro-wall youth interrupting a Native American demonstration, trying to intimidate them with mob rule. It's saddening, it's maddening, and it feels powerless in some ways. But there is a relationship between the spiral Taylor described and systemic and institutional racism. As they say in the Visions training, some racism is caught and some is taught, and it takes a lot of self-examination to determine which is which. At the root of it all is the desire to belong. It's rooted in existential angst, as Taylor suggested. Sometimes that just gets expressed in horrible ways. But that brings us to the gospel story today, the wedding at Cana. And this is the first sign in the Gospel of John. It's the only sign or miracle in all of the Gospels that does not involve a healing or an exorcism. It's the only one where somebody's life is not at stake. In this story, we have Jesus, who, by the way, was a partier. I hope you know that. John the Baptist was the ascetic, but Jesus was an eat, drink, and be merry kind of guy. He liked to have fun and enjoy the people around him. So Jesus, in this story, needs a little prompting from his mother to get going. But once he does, he takes this abundance of water. Our translation says 30 waters per container, but most scholars say it's more like 180 gallons in total. That's something like a milk jug for everybody in here. It's a lot of wine. And it's not the $2 chuck. This is the good stuff. It's such good wine that the steward wonders why they didn't bring this stuff out first when the guests were sober enough to tell the difference. In that day, the hospitality was a little more serious of an affair than it is for us. A wedding party was planned to last several days. Without grocery stores and food marts running out of food or drink, it was a big deal. The guests depended on the host for their needs, and not to be able to provide would bring shame on the host. So here's the thing, Jesus performs the sign in the gospel not because somebody needs it to heal or to be freed from demons. Jesus creates this abundant wine, showing revealing his identity as the Messiah, so that this party can go on, so that there is no outsider. Jesus makes an abundance of wine, 180 gallons of wine, simply to bring joy to a group of people, so that there won't be an outsider, so that there won't be shame, so that the party can go on and everybody can belong, and there won't be shame, and joy can be the outcome. The abundance of the wine is a sign that God's abundance is a gift. It's not to be hoarded. God's abundance, when turned inwards, can become greed and scarcity. The host at the party didn't say, I better take all that up and store it for a rainy day. Instead, God's abundance is meant to be shared at a party for everybody. Nobody has to go home early at God's party. God's abundance isn't there for our individual needs alone, though. God's abundance exists to pull us towards each other, to turn us from the human race into the human family. God's abundance changes us from strangers into community. And when that happens, we're taken care of individually as well. It's not that we can't or we shouldn't save stuff. It's that abundance is a call to generosity. And generosity leads to relationship. And relationship can lead to joy. And abundance, generosity, and joy, they're all so closely related. Recognizing abundance and sharing it with others and finding joy in the relationships that are renewed. It's a grace to be celebrated. It's a party. It's a feast. It's something we do every week right here at this table. So as we sit here on this 90th birthday weekend of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., in his words, if you are seeking the highest good, I think you can find it through love. I wonder if we can find the abundance of God that calls this whole human family out of fear, out of scarcity, and turns it into a party of love, where the wine flows freely and there is abundant joy, where difference is embraced, black and white, gay and straight, man and woman, cis and trans, all are welcome. And the host says, come in. There is plenty. You belong. Where people meet as strangers, but leave as friends. Where laughter is a sacrament, and stories can be overheard, and there are no outsiders. In just a minute, we're going to have a party at that table. And I invite you to come and taste and see and be refreshed and carry the party out into the world. Because everyone is welcome in the abundance of God's love.